Okay, we are back again into Ephesians and continuing on in our series. But I do want to just quick say a thanks to Philip and the group for leading us in worship this morning. Yes, thank you guys. Thank you for being with us today and just leading us. It's always good. And it's good to be back with my church family. I was in Virginia last week visiting my own family and had such a good time. Had a chance to be able to preach over there. It's kind of my home away from home. And but it's always good to be back with all of you guys. So I hope you had a Merry Christmas, Happy New Year. We are continuing on, as I said, in Ephesians. And we're picking up in Ephesians chapter 6. And I don't think I need to do a lot of introduction to this topic because it's about children obey your parents. And I think we all know what it's like and how hard that is sometimes. And we're going to talk about honor your father and your mother and all of that. And I think there's a lot to discuss here this morning, even though we're only taking 3 verses today. So like I said, I really just want to dive right into it, and hopefully you're ready for that. So I'm going to just read our section, and then we'll jump in. Ephesians chapter 6, verse 1. I guess I can put that up here. Ephesians 6, verse 1 says this: Children, obey your parents in the Lord, for this is right. Honor your father and mother, which is the first commandment with a promise, that it may go well with you, and that you may enjoy long life on the earth. So that's our text for today. There's a lot in here to talk about. And so with that, I'm just going to jump right in. This is kind of where we're going. And that is this. Summarize the whole sermon, put it all together, and it is all about honor your parents for life. And that it's a double meaning by the word for life. And if you want to do it, you could say honor your parents their entire life. Honor your parents. As long as you're alive, your life and their life, honor your parents. We'll talk about what it means to honor them. But you can also say that it's the other side of it, is we all know what it's like to have life while we're living. And what I'm saying here is I think what Paul's getting at is as we honor our parents, as we actually do this, it brings us life. It gives us life as we go do this. And so it's the double meaning, honor your parents for life. And we'll start with this. Why? Because you have to. Now, how many of you are told when you hear this, you have to do something, you're like, yes, I'm so excited about this. We don't like to be told, I have to do something, but that's really where it starts. In Ephesians chapter 6 and verse 1, it starts with a command. Children, obey your parents in the Lord, for this is right. Now notice, the thing that I set up here was this: honor your parents. I didn't say obey your parents for life. I said honor your parents for life. And then this first part here is Paul makes a command, and he uses a very different word. And the word means to hear, to listen, to hear under, to put yourself under, to listen and to do it. It simply means to obey. Obey your parents in the Lord, for this is right. Notice what it says. It doesn't say, obey your parents in the Lord as long as. It doesn't give an as long as opportunity here. It says, obey your parents in the Lord, for this is right. It is the basic responsibility of a child to make a home work. Now, the word there for child, or actually obey your parents, children, it says there at the very first word, children. The word there is, so we could say, is this a word for little kids? Is this a word for big kids? Is this a word for adult kids? How many of you have a parent? Okay, so everybody's paying attention. That's good. Every one of us has a parent. Every one of us is a child of somebody. Now, I don't usually talk about myself as a child of my parents. I might say I'm my dad's or my mom's son. I oftentimes refer to myself as that, but I don't necessarily say I'm the child of this, but it's true. I am the child. The word there that Paul uses for children is the same word that he would use for an adult child of somebody. So is it our responsibility? Do I have to obey my parents? So let's say I'm 51 years old and my mom calls up. Hey, did you clean your room? Not to say she would do that, but in the case that she did, hey, John, clean your room. And what am I supposed to do in that moment? Am I supposed to say, yes, Mom, Your kids probably have to, actually, Jenny, but as Emily says, no. Wow, this is right in okay. So anyway, so is that what I have to do? Do I have to then get off whatever I'm doing and go obey my mom because she is my mom and I'm her child? I don't think that's what the text is talking about. In fact, one of the things that it says, and when it comes to the marriage vows, for this reason, a man will leave his father and mother and be united to his wife, and the two will become one flesh. There is a leaving and there is a cleaving. So when a child leaves his parents' home, when a child goes out, they are on their own. And there is nowhere in the Bible that we see that as an adult person, I have to obey my parents in everything. It's just not there. And so, but what about those who maybe still live at home? I think of some of you adults here who are still living at home. For whatever reason, maybe you still live with an older parent or something. As long as you're under their roof, and that was always the thing. If you're under my roof, you have to obey your parents, right? Is that really true? Is that what I have to do? And I thought this was really a good way that somebody put it. You have to obey your parents as long as you are under your parents' care. You have to obey your parents as long as you are under your parents' care. If your parents are paying your insurance, your food bill, your bedding, your whatever else, if your parents are caring for you, you have to obey your parents. But that's why oftentimes we as children want to leave our parents, right? That's why we want to get out, because we want to have freedom. We want to do this. But one of the things that I oftentimes remind my own children is, with great freedom comes great responsibility. So yes, there is an amazing thing that happens when I get out of the house and I get to be on my own and I get to enjoy all the things that come with freedom. But at the end of the day, I lose a lot of being taken care of by my parents. And so I think when we look at the text here, it says, children, if you are a child, if you are under your parents' care of whatever age you are, if you are under your parents' care where they are providing the basic necessities of life for you, you have a responsibility to obey your parents. Why? Because they're over you. So as we go on with this, I said this very specifically in terms of you have to. Because that's what the law stated. And so I want to read a couple verses here. If you can go back to Exodus chapter 21. Back in the Old Testament, Genesis, Exodus. Exodus chapter 21. Now I thought about this. For those who just look at my slides online and don't actually listen to the sermon, they're going to see this one and think, what kind of church is Frontline Bible Church? Because in Exodus chapter 21, verse 15, anyone who attacks his father or his mother must be put to death. Verse 17. Verse 17, anyone who curses his father or mother must be put to death. How many of you have ever cursed your father or your mother? Yeah, exactly. We're going to find out how you're going to be put to death after the next verse. So why don't you go with me to Deuteronomy 21, verse 18. Like I said, I just crack up as I thought about people seeing this slide and then maybe looking at these verses going, wow, you have to or else. Deuteronomy chapter 21, verse 18. Deuteronomy 21, verse 18. If a man has a stubborn and rebellious son who does not obey his father and mother and will not listen to them when they discipline him. How many of you ever had a child like that? Okay? His father and mother shall take hold of him and bring him to the elders at the gate of the town. They shall say to the elders, this son of ours is stubborn and rebellious. He will not obey us. He is a profligate and a drunkard. Then all the men of his town shall stone him to death. You must purge the evil from among you. All Israel will hear of it and be afraid. Wow. How frustrated do you have to be with your kid to say, come with me, we're going to the gate. And you're going to get stoned when we go to the gate. And I don't mean what you think. I don't think you know what I'm talking about here. Now, the interesting thing of this is we don't find any instance of this actually happening. There's no recorded instance in the Old Testament of this actually happening. But I am pretty sure it probably did. I don't know about you as parents. I absolutely adore my kids. Absolutely. And I can't imagine how angry you would have to be at your kids to bring them to a place where you say, I want you dead. I can't even fathom that. So I'm sure this was not a situation where this kid, backtalked 3 times in one day. All right, we're going. You're dead today. I'm sure it wasn't like that. But it seems like, based on the law, that there was a time and a place at which there were certain children who seemed like they would never be able to be redeemed in this way. And the way the law was stated was, if children don't obey their parents, it not only causes disharmony in the home, but it actually causes disharmony in a nation. I read an interesting thing, and I thought it's actually sad. But this was written by a teacher regarding some of the kids and some of the things that she was seeing in her schools. And so she wrote this, and I thought it was very interesting. Teachers are afraid of the principal. Principals are afraid of the superintendent. The superintendent is afraid of the school board. The school board is afraid of the parents. The parents are afraid of the children. The children are afraid of nobody. Have you seen that in some of the world that we have today? It's like the inmates are ruling the asylum, it seems like at times. And when we look at this, we see some of the difficulties, and we look in our culture and we see around this lack of obedience, and you're like, wow, is this really what it's come to? And yet how many parents live in fear? They live in fear that if I actually discipline my child, what might happen? What might they go and say to the school? And granted, there are some parents out there who are not good parents when it comes to the way they discipline their kids and the things they do to them. And I'm glad that there are systems and things in place to protect kids. But a lot of times it's parents trying to be good parents. And the kids hear some of these things, and they go and they make up stories and whatever else, explode things. And next thing we know, these parents are being in big trouble because of it. We see it. I'll say this, parents, do you require your children to obey you? And I think that's a legit question. Being a parent is not easy. And we're going to talk next week about parenting and some of the things that come with this. But this week when it comes to kids, I used to think, man, I can't wait for the day when I get to spank my kids. Because I got plenty of spankings growing up. And I looked forward to the day when I was going to be the one doling them out versus receiving them. But I found out, my goodness, disciplining your kids is hard. It's easy to give out a spanking. It's a whole lot harder to be a good disciplinarian for your kids. In some cases, as kids, we look at our parents, and our parents are doing the best that they can. And I look back, and I look at my own parenting that I received growing up. And there was some crazy stuff that maybe some of you experienced, some of the things that we were allowed to do and that we weren't allowed to do as kids. And some of the things we weren't allowed to do is we weren't allowed to go to movies. How many of you here grew up, you couldn't go to movies? Yep, we weren't allowed to go to movies. We certainly weren't allowed to go to dancing, which was really a blessing in disguise for a white man like me. So that was good. I could just fall back on my parents. My parents don't let me dance. I'd be good if I could, but I just can't do it. There were things that I couldn't do, and I found out something. We were at my parents' house after my dad passed away. We were going through some of the things, and I came across this little book. And this was the book, Christian Youth and Entertainment. Now, the subtitle should say How Not to Have Fun. That's what it should say. But it doesn't. And I found this was from 1957. 1957, and this book was written about all the things you can and cannot do as a Christian. And it broke it down into red light things, yellow light things, and green light things. It was fascinating to read this. I'm reading this going, I think my parents memorized this book. Because this was all stuff that I couldn't do, and I wondered why in the world that I could not do that stuff. And it was right here in the book. This little book was determining my childhood. It was crazy. I'll never forget one of my friends at school. I was probably 14 at the time, somewhere in that area, so I was a young teenager. I remember one of my friends, he came and he said, hey, you want to spend the night at my house this week? Or this, I think it was a Friday night. I'm like, yeah, this sounds great. So he told me at school, we're going to go see a movie. I'm like, go see a movie? This is awesome. So we were talking about the movie, and I was excited. His parents pull up. And so we're just talking, and they're like, I'm in the back seat with my friend, and the parents are in the front seat. My parents are talking, and my dad asked the question, so, what are you guys going to be doing tonight? And the mom, or the dad, I think it was the dad, and he's like, well, we're going to go see a movie. Like, no, don't say this. And sure enough, my dad says, well, we don't do that. Can we do something else? Can you do something else? So what did we do? We just got pizza and we hung out at his house. And I remember being so bitter and angry at my parents because they ruined my fun. Well, here's the thing. The Bible text is pretty clear. I have to. I don't get to pick and choose because, my parents, even though it was based on a little book, I think, my parents were doing the best they could to raise us as kids. And if I were to disobey my parents, of which I never did, just kidding, if I were to disobey my parents, I am going against the authority that God has set up. And if you as a child, and I'm glad you kids are in here, if you as a child are thinking to yourself, my parents are so clueless, they're out of touch, they don't know what they're doing, I'm going to do what I'm going to do because I am smarter than my parents. If you do that, you can, but you are being, and the Bible's very clear, you're being disobedient. No matter how you cut it, you're being disobedient. I look back now and I'm extremely, extremely grateful for my childhood. I am. And even though there were some weird things that we could and we couldn't do, this book even says you can't race cars. That's what this book says. Even though there's like weird things that as kids you can and cannot do, they're still your parents. And as long as you are under their care, it is your responsibility in the Lord to obey them. It is. But we go on. So on the first one, you have to. It's part of just growing up. They're your parents. You have to obey them. But this is, I guess, another way I want to look at it. Yes, you have to. But the second part of it is you get to. You get to honor your parents. If we go back to Ephesians chapter 6. Ephesians chapter 6. It says, children, obey your parents in the Lord, for this is right. Now notice, I'll just one other thing. It says, in the Lord. If your parents are telling you to do something that is illegal, if your parents are telling you to do something that is unbiblical, your first responsibility is to obey the Lord. You do this in the Lord. But I think probably most kids, what your parents are telling you to do by cleaning your room or whatever it is not unbiblical. You might think it's not fair, but it's not unbiblical, okay? So children, obey your parents in the Lord, for this is right. And then he goes on, honor your father and mother, which is the first commandment with a promise. Now this is a commandment. If you go all the way back to the 10 commandments, okay, this was commandment number 5. Honor your father and your mother, that you may live long in the land. That's what Exodus chapter 20, verse 15 says, I believe it is. He says, you get to honor your father and your mother. Now, the reason why it says honor, even though it says honor is a command, even though it says honor is a command, there's something different about it, because the word obey means to listen, to kind of hear under. I place myself, I heard what you said, I submit myself, and I do it. The word honor, especially in the Old Testament, means to give weight to something. Now, what do we mean? Because the word literally means weighty or weight. Honor, give weight to. Have you ever thought about, received two differing opinions on something? You receive two different opinions on something, and you go to yourself, okay, which one do I trust more? Now, the thing that you say when it says, this one I trust more, is because you put more weight on what they're saying. That's the idea behind honor your father and your mother. It means I take and I put weight upon them. There is something that they are is weightier than something else or someone else. So when the Bible says to honor your father and mother, it literally means to prize them, to take it, to assess a value, to estimate a value, and I value them. I place great weight upon them. That's what it means to honor your father and your mother. I give weight to them. And so Paul, as he's writing this, I think what we see in verse 1 is obedience is simply an action. Have you ever obeyed and didn't want to? Oh, I'm obeying you, but in my mind, I'm completely hating you at this moment. You ever done something like that? Okay, probably you can relate to that. So I can obey and not honor. But honor is something I get to do. Honor is something that it's an attitude. Whereas maybe obedience is an action, honor is an attitude. And so when I honor someone, when I honor my father and my mother, I am internally placing weight upon them. And I can honor them at all stages of my life. I am no longer obligated as a man, a 51-year-old man who has my own home, and I even have a granddaughter, which is amazing, by the way. I'm old enough that I don't have to obey my parents. But for my entire life, I am to look at my parents and place weight and value. I'm to estimate weight and value to my parents. Now, I had the distinct privilege of having a good set of parents, great set of parents. And so that's not hard to do. But I have a choice to make, and the truth of the matter is, you do too. And I don't know what kind of parents you had, whether you had good parents or bad parents. I know some of the stories of people here in this church. And I think of some of the things that some of you underwent because of your parents. It's terrible, absolutely terrible. But the Bible text is still there, and that says, I have a choice to make, and that is, am I going to place weight and value upon my parents? Here's the thing. When I do it, one of the things that I learn is I learn about authority. I learn about authority. I learn a couple things about authority. First one is I learn about the presence of authority. You see, it is no secret that authority exists in this world, whether you like it or not. You know, as a child, we think to ourselves, man, I can't wait to get out from under the authority of my parents because they're the worst people in the world. They're out of touch, whatever else. They're taking away all my fun. I can't wait to get out and have all this freedom. And then I get out and I find all this freedom, and then I get a boss. I get out and I have all this freedom, and then I get married. I have all this freedom, and then I have bills, and I have police officers, And I have presidents that I like and that I don't like, and Congress people and whatever else. And I realize that even though I may be out of the authority of my parents, I will never in my life ever be out of the authority of someone. And so I learn, by honoring my parents, I learn what it means to honor and value authority. And I think that's a lot of what we've seen in terms of the decay of our society. Because there seems to be a distrust of authority that's being placed on there. I look at the way that some people speak about the police. I look at the way that some people speak about the president. I look at the way that people speak about people who are in authority over them. Some of the things people say about their teachers, whatever else. And we do it too. I mean, we all do it. But what we communicate is that even though they occupy a role of authority over us, we make the choice and we say, I don't have to honor you. I don't have to. It's really interesting, even in Hebrews, it talks about how we're supposed to honor those who are in authority over us as a church. And it's very easy that as long as you are doing the things that I agree with, as long as you're doing the things that I think are good, I will choose to honor you. But if I disagree with you and I don't think you're doing a good job, I have every right to take away my honor. You don't deserve my honor. We all do it. But one of the things that we learn in terms of honoring our parents is that as children, whatever age we are, it is a choice that I make. That I choose to give you value, I choose to give you weight, and I choose to do it. And we're going to talk about some of these things here at the very end, about how to honor somebody who is maybe hard to honor. How to do it. So honoring is simply a decision that I make. I was having a conversation this week with Pastor Brandon. And we were talking about a situation with he and his mom. And some of you know Brandon's story, and it's not that important with this. But one of the things that Brandon, as he was growing up, he had to honor his mom. He had to do it because that's what you got to do as teens, even as an adult. We have to honor them. I have to do it. But it was interesting that as he's gotten more mature in his faith, and he said, I made a decision that I get to honor my mom. And it was interesting because his mom said something to him that I thought was really interesting. She said to him, ever since you started going to church, I feel like our relationship has gotten better. Ever since you started going to church, I feel like our relationship has gotten better. And his response was, because it has. You see, when you're living for yourself, when it's all about what I want to do, what I want to do, what I want to do, I get to make the choice. And if I think you deserve honor, I'll give it to you. But if I don't think you deserve honor, I'm not going to honor you, no matter what role you play in this society. You see, as Christians, we realize that we are under the authority of God. And if God says do this, then there must be a purpose for it. And interestingly enough, his mom noticed. And what would happen if you chose to honor your parent? What would happen if you did that? That I'm going to choose to do this, even though maybe I don't want to, but I'm going to choose to do it anyway because it's the right thing to do. I get to do this. I thought it was interesting. If you can turn in your Bibles to 1 Timothy 5, 3-4. It's to the right from Ephesians. Ephesians, Philippians, Colossians, 1st, 2nd Thessalonians, 1 Timothy, before Titus. 1 Timothy chapter 5. I thought this was really interesting. Give proper recognition to those widows who are really in need. Okay? Seems odd to be talking about widows all of a sudden, but there was a problem back in the church. They didn't have Social Security back then. They didn't have some of those programs, and so a lot of widows, if their husband died or they didn't have family, whatever the situation, they were truly on their own. And there weren't social structures in place. And so the church came around them to say, hey, how can we care for them? How can we love them? How can we provide for them? But the point was, not every widow needed the same amount of care because some had family. And so it goes on to say in verse 4, but if a widow has children or grandchildren, these should learn, first of all, to put their religion into practice. I love that. By caring for their own family and so repaying their parents and grandparents, for this is pleasing to God. I thought that was so interesting. Put your religion into practice. Now, I think the word religion is a dirty word because a lot of times it conjures up what I'm supposed to do to keep God happy. That's what it is. But I think what Paul's getting at here is we say we're people of faith. We say that we are Christians. We say that, I go to church. I go to Frontline Bible Church. But one of the ways that I can show that I'm a believer is by honoring and caring for my parents, no matter what the age is. You know, as my mom is getting older, we're seeing symptoms of, I don't know if it's just old age or dementia or what it is, but, you know, when you repeat yourself over and over again, and you wonder, is she going to hurt herself? Is she going to burn the house down? Whatever the situation is. You know, we see all these questions, and it was a lot easier when my mom was very capable, when my dad was around and doing these things. And as parents get older, you need to care. And I don't know about you guys, but I'm busy. How many of you guys are busy here? You know, there's still things we have to do. But even just a simple phone call, you know, I'm checking in on my mom or whatever the situation is. It's amazing what those things can do. And what I really hear Paul saying is, don't just say I honor my parents because I have to. I get to. I get to call my mom. I get to talk to her about these things. I get to serve her by helping her with that recipe that she would have forgotten the ingredient out of. I get to do these sort of things. I think right now of Bob and Vicki Dolson, and right now as they are bringing in her mom and dad, probably into living in their home as her parents are getting older. And boy, I'll tell you, it's a sacrifice, and hearing the burden and stuff. But yet the thing is, you can look at it as, I have to do this. But you can also look at it in the case of, as a parent, as a child of a parent, I get to honor my father and my mother, no matter where they've been, no matter what they do. I get to do this. Because it's the way God designs. It's the way God designed. But it's even more than this. And I think it goes to this last part here. I have to obey my parents, okay? I have to do this. But I get to do this. But this is what I like about what Paul says. You'll want to. Yep, I have to. And I also get to do this. I get to put weight on them. But it says, Paul also goes on to say, you'll want to do this. It was 1993, summer of 93. My parents made me go to a conference. I think this conference was still part of this little booklet here, actually. Some of you are familiar with the name Bill Gothard and the Duggar family, all those. There's a lot of nonsense around out there. And I had to go to that conference. And I didn't want to do it. I fought against it. But God did something in my heart at that conference. He did something in my heart because it was really at that conference that I thought, maybe for the first time, that I saw that I had been working against my parents. My parents were trying to go this way in the best way they knew, which was a little twisted, but it was the best way they knew. My parents were trying to go this way, and I was trying to go that way. And we were living under the same roof. We were in the same house, and I was trying to go this way, and they were going that way. And I'll tell you, it resulted in a lot of clashing. And finally, at this conference, I went, and it wasn't so much about obeying my parents, even though I had to. I was living under their roof. I was under their care. I had to. It was more about a matter of, man, I'm actually living in rebellion against my parents, and in return, I'm living in rebellion against God. Because my parents are a duly appointed authority in my life. And as long as I'm in rebellion, guess who's the most miserable? It was me. And I came away from this conference, and I made a choice that I was going to allow my parents to be my parents. There were things that I came and that I threw away, stuff that I didn't need anymore in my life. I made some changes when it came to my friends. It was interesting. When I went to church, it was like I saw church a little bit differently. It wasn't this thing that I had to do. I realized that, man, I want to do this. There was and it's not to say my parents and I never fought after this, but something changed when I recognized that my parents weren't against me. My parents were actually for me. And then we had all sorts of discussions, and we got to talk about things like going to movies. I just found out this past week that my mom went to go see a movie. I judged her. I'm just saying, I judged her. You know, as time went on, we now play with face cards at my house, at my parents' house. We do things that we didn't. But it took me submitting myself and saying, I need to honor my parents. I need to obey my parents. When I'm asked to, I obey them. But I got to a place where I wanted to do this because I saw the impact that can happen. And Paul goes on to say, if we go back to Ephesians, he says this, if I could turn the page. Honor your father and mother, which is the first commandment with a promise. Now, it's not the first commandment because it was actually commandment number 5. And it's actually not the first one with a promise because commandment number 2 has a promise that goes with it. So what is it? If you look at the way the Greek reads, it actually says, this is a first commandment. So you could actually almost say the word first means primary. Like this is a really, really important commandment. And it's the first commandment that deals with children, which is why I asked all the kids to be in here today. So thank you guys, you've been awesome. I'm just telling you. It is a first commandment, but it's also a first commandment that comes with a promise. It's a primary commandment that comes with a promise, and the promise is this: that it may go well with you and that you may enjoy long life on the earth. You know, Paul's comment wasn't just that you could do this, you know, as long as you do this, you're not going to get a beating, which is probably true, you know. If you honor and obey your parents, you probably won't get a spanking. Probably shouldn't say beating, that's bad, but probably won't get a spanking, right? But it's more than that because Paul says, if you do this, it will go well with you. In other words, it's for your benefit when this happens. And he says that you'll enjoy long life on the earth. Now, is this a promise that if I obey my parents, I won't die until I'm old? Is this a promise that says if I disobey my parents, it's going to be curtains to me on my 18th birthday or something like that? I don't think it says that. I think what Paul's getting at here is it's a principle that is true. But yet it's interesting that he's taking this principle from the Old Testament that was very much given to Israel. And it's very specifically in the Old Testament says that they would enjoy long life in the land, the promised land, the land that was theirs. If they do it God's way, it goes well. If they don't do it God's way, it goes poorly. And I think in this case, Paul takes this promise and he brings it to today and he says, something works. When you honor your parents, when you do this, not because just you have to, but sometimes you do, but because you get to, you're going to want to do this because I'm telling you, your life is going to be better. How many of you experienced something like that growing up? When you were in your teenage years doing whatever, and it's amazing, you come out of that and you realize, my parents weren't that dumb. We go on. There's way more that I could talk about here, but I'm going to skip to this last little section because I'm running out of time. What do I do if my parents are hard to honor? What do I do? I'm going to give you 3 things here, and hopefully this will help. I'm going to make a choice that I'm not going to curse my parents. I'm going to make the choice that I'm not going to curse my parents. Now I say this, I put it in my notes. What do you do if your parents are hard to honor? Parenthesis, or if you're teenagers. Okay? What do you do if your parents are hard to honor or if you're in those teenage years of just trying to pull away from mom and dad because it's part of what needs to happen? Those teenage years are formative for a purpose. But what do you choose to do? What do you do during these times? And the first thing is, I'm not going to curse my parents. In the book of James, chapter 3, and I think, I only put verse 10 there. It's actually verses 9 and 10. I guess it is just verse 10. It says, and so blessing and cursing come pouring out of the same mouth. Surely, my brothers and sisters, this is not right. Verse 9 was really important, but I didn't put it in my notes. But it talks about how we praise God with our mouth, and yet we turn right around and we curse other people. So I come on a Sunday morning and I sing praise to God. God, you are amazing. I do this, and oh my goodness, God, all your works are wonderful, except that one work when you made my mom. When you made my mom, that was horrible. And she deserves to be cursed based on all these sort of things. Instead, what Paul says is he says, okay, you praise God with your mouth. Don't turn around and curse somebody else. It's just not right. So can you disagree with your parents and not curse them? Absolutely. Absolutely. This in no way, shape, or form needs to say that you need to agree with everything your mom and dad say. It doesn't mean that you have to wholeheartedly believe it. Because you know what? Parents are fallible. They are. But it does say that even though I may not agree with you, I will not call you names. I will not disparage you to my friends. I'm not going to go make some post on TikTok or Instagram or something about how horrible I have it at home. I'm not going to do that. I'm going to choose to not curse my parents. That's a choice that we have to make. Whether you're a teenager or whether you're maybe somebody who's older who didn't have such good parents. And some of you are here today with that. I'm not going to curse you. The other verse there says, the tongue is the power of life and death, and those who love it will eat its fruit. The second thing is this. I'm not going to fix my parents. I'm going to make a choice. I'm not going to fix them. I can't be their Jesus, and neither can you. Now, maybe for some of you, your parents are dead. Maybe you didn't have such good parents, your parents are dead. You clearly are not going to fix them, but I probably know how God took care of them. You know, when I think of the things, the choices that we have to make, it's hard. But I can't fix my parents. I have to let them be chosen, be worked on by God. So even though they may be hard to honor, I'm not going to fix them. I'm not going to curse them. But then here's the last one. I'm not going to stop being around my parents. I get it. Some parents are hard to honor. I put up there with appropriate boundaries. Like I said, for some of you, some of the stuff you endured, whether it's sexual abuse, physical abuse, whatever, the Bible does not say you have to go put yourself back in that place to be able to be honorable to your parents. Maybe the appropriate boundary is, Mom, you're going to be over here and I'm going to be over here. But it doesn't mean that I'm not going to stop checking in on you. It doesn't mean that I'm not going to stop loving you. Maybe I'm still going to send you a card thanking you, because I'll bet you something is somehow good of your mom or your dad. I'm going to make the choice. I'm going to be a part of their life no matter what. You see, that's how I honor my parents. It's a choice, though. And so as we wrap up today, do you honor your parents? You know, for you little kids out here, littler kids maybe, I shouldn't say little kids, littler kids, the younger kids, I get it. I was there once, maybe it was a long time ago. I get it. It can be hard to do what your parents ask you to do, but they're your parents, and they love you. Maybe they have a hard time showing it, but they love you. The way you can honor them back is by doing what they say. You can do it. But as we get older, as we go through life, and I think of some of you who are maybe older right now, what can you do to bring weight, to give weight to your parents, to value them highly so that others look around and see them? Trust me, you can be an example of that. And so here's the closing challenge. I'll say this. What's one thing you can do today to honor your parents? Maybe it's to honor them. Maybe it is going to be that phone call that says, I'm taking time out of my life because I want to honor you and show you I care. Maybe it's going to be sending them something. Maybe it's going to be dropping by, giving them something, whatever it is. Maybe it is going to be cleaning your room today that they've been asking you to do for the last week, and you do it willingly. Maybe that's what it is. But maybe for some who have had parents who have died, what can you do to honor their memory? Maybe it's a post that you can make on Facebook. Maybe it's something. And you never know how your honoring could go a long way toward maybe inspiring somebody else to honor their parents. honoring your parents is biblical. You have to do it. You get to do it. You'll want to do it when you see the fruit of it. Let's pray. Lord, I just want to thank you for today. I thank you for your word. I thank you for my parents. I am who I am because of them. And they were far from perfect, but I know they love me. I'm thankful that I grew up in the family that I did, even though I wasn't very honoring to them as much as I should have, but I thank you for them. I pray for every one of us here, myself included, that we would find ways to honor our parents, that we would give them the weight that they deserve. May they feel cared for by us, even as Paul says, may we put our religion into practice by the way that we treat our parents. May we show that we are your followers because we truly honor those who you put over us. I thank you for this day. I thank you for this chance that we've had to be together as a church family. May we not just hear your word and then leave and no changes happen. God, I pray that we may leave here today with a greater awareness that you care about all aspects of life, even what happens in the home. So we love you. We thank you. In Jesus' name we pray. And all those in agreement said, amen.